What's going on? It's the Polygon Don, and today I want to talk about 5 massively underrated games for the PS4. Some old, some new, some epic and some low key, but all incredible and in my opinion don't get the flowers they deserve, so we're going to do that here today. With all that said, let's get into it.
Never gets old.
Let's go.
Star Trek Resurgence is a point-and-click adventure game very much in the vein of those early Telltale games. In fact, it was developed by Dramatic Labs, which was founded by former Telltale Games staff members, so it's fair to draw similarities and expect more of the same. But in my opinion at least, this is up there with the best of them. In fact, I personally believe this could be one of the most overlooked games from last year. Set directly after the era portrayed in the classic 90s Star Trek TV show Star Trek The Next Generation, you'll take control and play as First Officer of the USS Resolute, Jara Rydek, and Petty Officer and Engineer, Carter Diaz. The Resolute has been tasked with overseeing a diplomatic mission organised by Ambassador Spock to mediate a dispute between two formerly peaceful alien civilizations regarding control of valuable mining rights, but soon discover that an unseen enemy is manipulating both parties to their own advantage. I won't go any further into that here as I don't want to spoil the story, but I will add that this game acts as almost a sequel to a very particular and popular episode from the TV show. At least it was easily one of my favourite episodes. That's not to say that if you aren't familiar with Star Trek The Next Generation, you won't grasp what's occurring in Star Trek Resurgence, as the game definitely has its own standalone story to tell. It's just that if you are a fan, it does a really good job of enriching and expanding an already brilliant narrative path set by the show. In fact, if you are a Trekkie at all, then keep your eyes peeled throughout this game, as it is littered with Easter eggs and little gestures of acknowledgement to that classic TV show. You can clearly feel as you play through it, it was lovingly made by fans first and developers second. Playing as both Rydek and Diaz, they each have their own distinct storylines and hurdles they need to overcome. Rydek is constantly torn between showing loyalty to either her veteran officers or her captain, who becomes increasingly reckless in the command of the Resolute, while Diaz is the up-and-comer looking to make a name for himself down in the lower decks. There's quick-time events, dialogue choices and puzzles that need solving, as well as some surprising action sequences including some cover-based shooting that I was genuinely not expecting. There's a guide to all your progress made with various key relationships to help keep you on your desired path, but to be quite honest with you, I very rarely looked at this and after a while I even forgot it existed. There are a lot of mini-games to interact with, some more fun than others, that serve as a means of distraction to the fact that essentially you are just moving through environments, engaging in conversations and deciding how you wish to respond. The decisions you make in these encounters does have an impact in the story moving forward, as does your ability to maintain relationships with your crewmates and their differing personalities. There's actually a lot more mechanics at play here than the typical Telltale game, but like I said, some stick the landing better than others. You get to fire off your phasers, plot navigational waypoints, utilise your tricorder for a number of tasks, spacewalk and even fly transport shuttles, but I can't help feeling like they could have scrapped a few of these to better implement the ones that actually work and are fun from the jump. Put it this way, flying a shuttle in this is a lot less captivating than it should be, and I love me some flight control mechanics in games, more of which we'll get into later in the video. But I did just want to add that as good as this game is, and as weird as this might sound for a Telltale style game, I think it would have actually benefited from having less player engagement at times. But honestly, that's my only real gripe with this. Whether you're a Trekkie or not, or can recall certain episodes of The Next Generation or not, the story in this is that good. And equally, if you're a fan of those early Telltale games like the first Walking Dead and Tales from the Borderlands and The Wolf Among Us for example, you should 100% give this a go. It even shares some DNA with the Mass Effect games too, so even just as a sci-fi nerd, this is well worth checking out. criminally underrated and tragically disregarded, this is easily one of, if not the best Star Trek games we've got in years, and deserves to be played and talked about a hell of a lot more than it currently is.
Firing photon torpedoes.
I beseech you to compose a melody for me, a counter to the song contained within this locket of my mother's. I realize this request will seem strange, that your first thought will be to come straight here, but without your composition, all hope of holding back the darkness gathering here will be lost. Your love, always, Elizabeth.
Maid of Sker is a first-person survival horror game from Welsh developer and publisher Wales Interactive. Set in the year 1898, you'll play as Thomas Evans as he arrives at the fictitious island of Sker to investigate the whereabouts of his beloved, Elizabeth Williams. Elizabeth's family have long been custodians of Sker Hotel, a maze-like and mysterious building with a generous amount of grounds surrounding it. Unsure of the exact whereabouts and general well-being of his lover, playing as Thomas, you'll have to navigate through this creepy and seemingly abandoned hotel in order to uncover the dark mysteries that Elizabeth's family are so desperate to keep hidden, as well as Elizabeth herself. The lore is predominantly provided by notes that you find scattered throughout the hotel and by the periodical conversations you'll have with Elizabeth via an old telephone, with each phone call further fleshing out each of their characters and the relationship between them. Before locating and essentially rescuing Elizabeth, it's through one of these phone calls that she tasks you with collecting these creepy little music box cylinders dotted throughout the hotel. Reasons for which I won't get into here, as that's verging on spoiler territory, but that's the broad strokes of your mission when you first arrive. As you make your way through the grounds of this vast estate, you will eventually realise you are not alone, as you encounter what the game calls the Quiet Ones. Faceless beings that serve as the antagonist and main threat that you'll find yourself up against. Unfortunately, there's no real way to fight them. Instead, you'll need to either sneak past or distract them in order to progress through levels, but you'll need to do it incredibly quietly as they have exceptional hearing abilities. The Quiet Ones are completely blind, what with them not having a face, so you can literally stand or crouch right in front of them providing you're quiet enough, but even your breath can betray you in this game. So along with the crouch mechanic to dampen the sound of your footsteps at the cost of speed, should you find yourself cornered by a Quiet One, a quick press of R2 will cover Thomas's mouth with his hands, allowing him to silently hold his breath for a short time. This mechanic can be utilised throughout the game, but definitely comes in handy the further you venture into the hotel. Some areas are so decrepit and dusty that it will cause Thomas to cough, revealing his location to any nearby nasties that happen to be lurking in the shadows. It can't be spammed either, as is the nature with breathing, so timing it right is key. At some point around the halfway mark of your descent into madness, you get a hold of the phonic modulator, which gives you a bit more agency when it comes to the Quiet Ones. Sending out a sweeping sound wave in the direction you're facing, the sonic boom is a little too much for our faceless antagonists with their sensitive ears to handle, momentarily immobilizing them, which opens up an opportunity for you to cut and run or quickly hit that switch that's keeping you from entering the next area. So, like I said, a bit more agency. You'll still be running like a coward, but at least this time you can stun them first. I've heard it be described as a budget Resident Evil, and while it does share some similarities like the iconic save room and typewriter setup, only here it's a gramophone instead, it's less about Resi's moment-to-moment horror and action and more about the gradual build-up of tension through its environment and lore exposition. It's quite slow and methodical, there's not a ton of gameplay mechanics or even collectibles to keep an eye out for, and other than the Quiet Ones and the helpful little doggy that shows up from time to time to aid in navigating you, it can feel a little desolate and hopeless. Even the actual horror elements of the game aren't really that, well, horrific. Aside from the occasional jump scare, this isn't really all that scary. But what it does have, however, is an incredible sense of atmosphere and brilliantly interconnected level design. Sneaking around an eerie hotel, uncovering secrets that make your journey feel more sinister and ominous with every step, does a great job at steadily ramping up the tension as you delve deeper and deeper into the hotel and its menacing past. If you want a survival horror game that's more into telling you its story than it is stressing you out and scaring the pants off you, then keep an eye out for Maid of Sker the next time you're game hunting.
Please, I beg of you, no! I'll give you anything! You can have it all!
Next up we have the Pawsome Pack of Cat Quest 1 and Cat Quest 2. Now for the purpose of this video, I'll only be discussing and showcasing the original Cat Quest, as that's the only one I've currently seen to completion. Essentially, Cat Quest is a top-down action role-playing game set in the bite-sized open-world kingdom of Felingrad. You'll play as an anthropomorphic cat who is on a mission to rescue his recently kidnapped sister from a mysterious villain. Your journey begins with the revelation that the strange purple mark on the back of your head has a connection to a long-lost lineage called the Dragonblood. In order to rescue your sister, you'll first have to take down a handful of terrifying and problematic dragons released by the same nefarious rascal that spirited your sister away. However, even though you are indeed a descendant of the Dragonblood, you are still woefully underprepared for the task at hand when the game first starts. And so our little furry warrior must level up, and the quickest way to do this is to take on quests left on notice boards by the inhabitants of each village. Gameplay includes real-time combat and is fairly simple, but there is enough depth to it to allow experimentation with melee weapons and magic casting, and overall was incredibly fun to play around with. There are dungeons to crawl through, loot to discover, and the occasional light puzzle to solve. In fact, there's a constant sense of progression in this game. You will level up or find better loot every 10 minutes, and that's no exaggeration. It's a short game at around 5 hours, so maybe that's to be expected, but because of this accelerated rate of progress, it makes the experience moreish and incredibly hard to put down. Simple yet addictive gameplay and the loop of quest taking, cave diving and treasure chest looting never really felt laborious or boring. It's like this game knows exactly what it wants to be and trims off all the fat to ensure you get to the good stuff as quickly as possible. The story is fairly by the numbers, but does have a few twists and turns along the way to keep things interesting. It can also be funny on occasion too, and overall I found the writing to be quite good, which I wasn't really expecting. I will say this however, depending on what your mileage is with puns, you might want to prepare yourself, as this game takes every God-given opportunity to throw in a feline play on words with pretty much every NPC dialogue encounter. Some are better than others, but there are just so many here that after a while I just became numb to it all. Aside from the odd cringe pun, on the whole I absolutely love my time with this short and sweet game that you can easily finish over a weekend. I'm pretty sure that Cat Quest was recently added to the PlayStation Plus catalogue of games. I'm not sure under which tier or if that includes both Cat Quest 1 and 2, but it's worth bearing in mind if you're already a member and aren't too fussed about owning it physically. But for the physical collectors out there, a physical release of both Cat Quest 1 and 2 combined called the Pawsome Pack is available for PS4 and Switch and can still be found for very affordable prices. Although what with the imminent release of the third instalment sometime around early August I believe, the Pawsome Pack might see a bump up in value, so if you were interested in playing these before Cat Quest 3 comes out and wanted to own them physically, I would consider grabbing a copy of this sooner rather than later.
Commander Shadow, the sweep doctrine. Protect the assault wings. Seek out and engage all enemies in this sector. Honor the Prophet. In chorus, Sage. Hit them hard and fast, my warriors. Nothing will disrupt the construction of the Jara Citadel. In chorus.
Chorus, by developers Fish Labs, is a third-person space combat game that's more arcadey than it is sim-like in its approach to spaceflight and its navigational control system. You'll be playing as Nara, a skilled, high-level navigator with a complicated past that pilots a sentient starcraft known as Forsaken. You'll work together to ultimately defeat the Circle, which is an oppressive cult led by the Great Prophet and is hell-bent on dominating the entire universe. The game applies an open world or open space nature to its playing field, and as you traverse through it, you'll complete main mission objectives and numerous optional side quests. All the while you are leveling up and switching up the arsenal available to Forsaken. Whether that's through weaponry such as missile launchers, Gatling guns and lasers for example, or through performance enhancing mods that can be placed into 3 separate slots on board. It's quite light on the tinkering side of things, but there is enough there to play around with until you find your perfect loadout. As you maneuver through this beautifully rendered expanse of space, dogfighting here and racing there, you'll eventually come across various ancient temples. Exploring these and solving the genuinely tricky puzzles within will grant Nara and her cognizant spaceship ether powers. These are special combat abilities that can dramatically change the direction of battle when you find yourself in a pinch. Like the Right of the Hunt ability for instance, that allows Forsaken to immediately warp directly behind an enemy, giving you a window of opportunity to flank, shoot and neutralise your enemies in an instant. The story is okay, it certainly has its moments, but there's nothing truly memorable to write home about or anything. However, the moment-to-moment gameplay here is Chorus's biggest draw, and thankfully due to its genuinely tight and engaging controls and impressive overall design, it more than lives up to it. At first it can quickly feel a little disorienting when up against multiple enemies. Attempting to keep track of them while being close enough to engage with can leave you feeling a little dizzy as you sweep your camera around trying to get a lock on them. But as you spend more time with the game and your own player skill increases, making use of the mechanics given to you like barrel rolls, acceleration and deceleration, along with the aforementioned ether abilities, everything starts to fall into place and you genuinely start to feel like a badass space fighter pilot. This definitely reminded me of some of the old school greats of the genre like Rogue Squadron, but this differs quite a bit when you add in the extra layer of complexity granted by Nara's special abilities. There's substantially more to it than just fly and shoot, and I love it for that. The craft designs were top tier, the gorgeous and colourful backdrop of space that you fight in, or the cramped and claustrophobic ancient temples that you explore in were all stunningly designed. This level of detail combined with the intricate control scheme which is absolutely critical to a game like this, and the epic space battles which were exactly that, made this a genuinely memorable space shooter of recent memory. And it's a genre that really doesn't get all that much love on consoles. It's a shame then that this still wasn't enough to meet expectations set by publisher Deep Silver's parent company Embracer Group. And as a result, we're probably not likely going to see a return to this corner of deep space anytime soon. Massively underrated and appreciated. If you like your space combat games to feel more arcadey than simmy, keep an eye out for this one and grab a copy next time you see it.
I'm a force in the shadows.
Attack on Titan 2 Final Battle is a third-person hack-and-slash game by Japanese Musou legends Omega Force. Unlike the majority of their body of work, however, this is not a hundreds of weak enemies on screen that you can murder in one sweep of your sword type game. Don't get me wrong, I like their usual output and genuinely feel like there's a time and a place for them, but this is way better than anything they've put out before and drastically different. Licensing the critically acclaimed anime and manga series, you'd think that would do half of the work for you in terms of developing a game, as the story is already done and dusted, and as many believe, myself included, that it's one of the best storylines ever told in an anime. So you're already onto a winner. But I think it's because of that already established and die-hard fan base that expectations were already sky high and things could have easily gone very wrong, as is the case for all the other countless anime games out there that are just half-baked arena fighters. Thank God then that Omega Force didn't take that route with their adaptation of Attack on Titan, as anime licensing aside, this is just straight up a fantastic game to play. Attack on Titan 2 Final Battle, specifically the Final Battle version, I'll explain more on that shortly, covers the story beats of the first 3 seasons of the award-winning anime series. However, instead of following an already established character, you'll create your own protagonist that experiences all the major events from the anime right alongside its memorable cast. This I thought was a stroke of genius, as it allows players to get creative while also providing more immersion in cutscenes and the game's more serious moments. You really feel like you are there and part of this legendary group of young individuals raised in the most horrific and cruel environment. Set in huge open expanses of land, you'll Naruto run or horse ride through them, finding and eliminating the giant titans that roam around looking for little humans to snack on. Once you set eyes on your target, you can activate your omnidirectional movement gear, or ODM gear for short, in order to zipline across your target, hacking and slashing as you do so, eventually striking the killer blow on the napes of their necks. It may look like I'm zipping around like Spider-Man in the footage here, but it genuinely feels a lot different to that, and took me a fair few hours to fully get to grips with it. But man, once I did, once it clicks into place how the physics of it works, I was just blown away by how much fun it was. Titans come in all shapes and sizes, each with their own horrendous facial expressions, but occasionally you will have to fight much tougher iterations that require you to switch up your tactics if you want to take them down successfully. Depending on how efficiently you achieve this will determine the amount and rarity of the resources you can gather, which you can then use to further enhance your equipment. There's an undeniable cadence to the movement while you're airborne, but you still need to position yourself correctly in order to do sufficient damage, and you'll either need structures or trees to tether your ODM gear to so that you can propel yourself into the air. So fighting a Titan in an open field with no trees can make it tricky to reach the all-important nape in order to get that finishing blow. Luckily, there's a lock-on system to help keep your gaze fixed on your target, and this can be switched to target the different body parts of the Titan. Here you can target the backs of the knees, amputating your target for example, which not only immobilizes them, but it reduces the distance needed to reach the nape. Perfect for when you do find yourself fighting in an area with limited anchor points. Most Titans are dumb and thick as 2 planks of wood, but occasionally you do come across one that can read how you fight and blocks access to their necks with their hands for example. I won't explain how or why here in case there are some of you that want to go into this blind and haven't read the manga or seen the show, but those instances were some really memorable encounters. There's so much I haven't discussed too, like the RPG elements of upgrading your gear and leveling up skills, the fact that you not only create your own custom character but that you can still play as the other well-known characters of the show that each come with their own fight styles, speed and weaponry. Then there's the persona-like bonding events that strengthen each member individually, the epic and legendary boss battles, the base building and structure building aspect, where you can create strategically located bases that either resupply you and your forces or can engage with and harm the Titans directly, like catapults etc. There's even an online element too, which I barely touched so I can't really talk on that, but basically there's a lot to this game. This might be my favourite ever anime adapted video game, with absurdly satisfying gameplay mechanics and the final battle version comprising of storylines lifted from seasons 1 to 3 of the show. You really get a fulfilling experience of what makes the anime such an incredible piece of media. And if you're a fan of the show and feel a little lost now that it's all over, this is a great way to further explore that world and better yet, live in it for a while. For a bit of context about me, I usually have about 3 different games that I play on rotation, usually from different genres. It's rare that I play a game of this size from start to finish without breaking it up by playing something else, but this was just that addictive that once I was accustomed with the controls, it was all I could think about playing and I just absolutely devoured it. A dedicated and focused devouring, if you will. Now I do want to address the many different releases of Attack on Titan for anyone unfamiliar. There's the original Attack on Titan, Attack on Titan 2, and Attack on Titan 2 Final Battle. Now Attack on Titan covers the first season of the show, while Attack on Titan 2 retreads the same ground covered from the first game and therefore season 1 of the show, and it also includes the major plot points from season 2. Attack on Titan 2 Final Battle is a DLC pack for Attack on Titan 2 that adds somewhat more of a rounded conclusion by incorporating key story moments from season 3 of the show. Now if you buy Attack on Titan 2 Final Battle physically, you get all of this on the disc and is by far the best version to buy. Even if you haven't played the first game or can't afford to buy both, scrap the rest and just get Attack on Titan 2 Final Battle. Now it is considerably more expensive than its predecessors, which I think a low print run may have contributed to, but it's easily the best one to own as it's essentially a trilogy of story content all rolled into one. An absolutely fantastic video game that is ridiculously underrated considering the pedigree of the license it is using and just how well it uses it. Do not sleep on this one.
Walter.
Well, there you have it, gang, another 5 criminally underrated games from the PS4's massive library. Let me know down in the comments which ones you may have skipped and whether I might have persuaded you to give them another look. And if you like the video, have a think about hitting the like button as it does help out the channel quite a bit. And also if you're new here, then hit the subscribe button to keep updated on my future uploads. Next up, there'll be some more PS3 content coming your way, but I am currently playing through some insanely good hidden gems for the PS4, which will likely follow soon after, so keep your eyes peeled. That's going to wrap things up here though, guys, so thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care, be good, and game on.